So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our free immigration Q&A. We're thrilled to have you here this evening. This event is hosted by Devant, and this is our live immigration Q&A, ways to extend your status if your post-grad work permit is expiring. This event is hosted by Devant. And Devant, in case you're not familiar with Devant, we assist over 48,000 international students and newcomers to Canada to get hired and to be successful here. We offer free actionable advice from career coaches and industry experts at our live events. We offer the latest AI-driven tools to polish up your resume, your interview skills, and your labor market knowledge. We also offer introductions and connections to employers to aid your immigration, academic life, and career development. We partner with over 25 universities and colleges across Canada, so please make sure you reach out to your career centers for free advice and support as well. And we also partner with about 10 non-for-profits as well. So we are just thrilled to offer these sessions for you to support you and welcome you and to assist you in your success here in Canada. Now, before we start, I would like to acknowledge the land on which I am residing today for this webinar. I am in the region of Durham, and we exist on the lands that the Mississauga, Sagig, and Nishabik had inhabited for thousands of years prior to European colonization. These lands are the traditional and treaty territories of the nations covered under the Williams Treaties, including the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, Alderville First Nation, Hiawatha First Nation, Kervlave First Nation, and the Chippewa Nations of Georgina Island, Bosole, and Rama. I honor, recognize, and respect Indigenous peoples as right holders and the stewards of the lands and waters on which we have the privilege to live. In our efforts towards reconciliation, we continue to build and strengthen relationships with First Nations, as well as the large Métis communities and the growing Inuit communities here in Durham. Personally, as a newcomer myself, both my parents are newcomers to Canada. I'm a second-generation newcomer. I recognize that we are visitors here, and they are the first and original settlers and owners of our land. I'm committed to learning from Indigenous values and knowledge, building opportunities for collaboration, and recognizing that we are all connected. So I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat. Please tell us a little bit about where you're from. Feel free to introduce yourself in terms of your career goals, what school you're from, and to stay connected with each other. So it's really nice to meet you. My name is Sisha Maharaj. I'm a senior consultant, business development and external relations with Devant. And today we have the pleasure of introducing Elizabeth Long. Elizabeth is a Canadian immigration lawyer, barrister, solicitor, and partner. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Elizabeth so that you have an idea of the expert that you'll be able to ask questions to from later today. Before we do that, if I can get you to go to the next slide, a little bit of logistics. Just to let you know, this is a webinar format, so you are muted right now. However, I want to encourage you to use the chat, as I said, to introduce yourself. I'm going to encourage you to use the Q&A feature. It's circled at the bottom, so you can submit your questions. We will have quite a few questions. I know a lot of you are interested and curious about this topic, so please use the Q&A for your questions, not the chat. I will sort through the Q&A and I will ask the broad questions first to make sure that it's relevant to everybody here. If you have personal questions, you are invited to follow up with Elizabeth directly for one-on-one sessions, and I'll let you know about the process and the discounted perks that you have available to you as part of being the Devant community. Also, there is no need to use your video. This session is recorded and it will be shared with everyone who has registered and attended this session. And for future events, you can go onto our website, which is on the screen there. So now allow me, please, to introduce Elizabeth. Elizabeth Long is a leading immigration lawyer in Canada. She's an avid advocate on immigrant and refugee rights and frequently presents and advises on immigration issues to organizations, universities, members of parliament, unions, and the media. She has also testified several times before the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration on various immigration policies. Elizabeth holds a Juris Doctor law degree from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors in psychology from Memorial University of Newfoundland. She also holds a Master of Law degree from Osgoode Law School, York University, where she focused on the intersection between immigration and labor and employment law for foreign workers. She has been certified by the Law Society of Ontario as a specialist in citizenship and immigration law. A prestigious list of only 65 lawyers in Canada belong. Elizabeth speaks both English and Mandarin. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us again and your time today. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Sisha, for that wonderful introduction. It's great to be here with you guys today. So today we are going to talk about an important topic, how to extend your work permit before your current postgrad work permit expires. Today we're going to concentrate mainly on the temporary status of how to extend your work permits. We do these sessions every single month, and we have done a lot of sessions on permanent residence, and so feel free to go to the YouTube channel to check those out, okay? So, these days, a lot of people are in Canada on postgrad work permits, and there's such a limit on permanent residence. To give you an example, we have right now 1 million people on study permits and 1.3 million people on work permits. But we only have, under the economic streams, around 200,000 spots, 110,000 spots for express entry. And what that means is very few people overall are going to be able to get permanent residence in the next year or so. So what happens if your postgrad work permit is about to expire in the next year or so? So I'm going to, first of all, go through some strategies, some topics, and we're going to talk about different kinds of work permits that you can get, because your postgrad work permit, it's back to the old rules. Last year and the year before, and like throughout COVID, a lot of the government gave some leeways to people who had postgrad work permits to allow them to extend their work permits, but it's no longer the case. If you have a postgrad work permit, that is the only postgrad work permits you're able to have. If you want to extend your postgrad work permit afterwards, you're going to have to apply under something else. But one of the things I really wanted to emphasize to you guys about is the ability to use implied or maintained status, okay? So you have the legal right to stay in Canada and work based on the conditions of your original work permit until a decision is made, as long as the application is submitted properly before the expiry date of your work permit. A lot of people think that when you get this letter, so if you file a work permit extension before your work permit expires, you automatically have implied status. Okay, you get that as a matter of right. Okay, the government sends out a letter. It's titled WP-EXT to people who have filed their work permits and should be under implied status. And it says, you are able to work in Canada until some random date that they put on there, or until a decision is made, whichever comes first. And a lot of people think, oh, this is a temporary work permit. And they say, oh, I'm allowed to work until this date. After this date, I'm not allowed to work. That is completely wrong. You don't get a temporary, all work permits are temporary status, but there is no such thing as temporary. That letter does not give you status. You have a status because you filed the work permit extension before your current work permit expires. And that random date that the government puts on the letter is random. It doesn't mean anything. If you don't have a decision before that, after that date passes, you still have the legal right to work in Canada until a decision is made. Okay, there's even something on the IRCC website that says that. So why does the government put this stupid random date on? Well, I think it's stupid because it causes a lot of confusion. But they were originally trying to help you in, you can present that letter to OHIP, for example, and tell OHIP to, give you OHIP until that date, and, something to show your employers. But I also find that it does cause a lot of confusion, and they should have worded it much, much more differently, so that you know that you have status until a decision is made. Now, very importantly, though, keep in mind that this implied status that you have until a decision is made is lost if you leave Canada before the decision is made and after your previous work permit expired. Okay? So let's say I have a work permit until October 31st. All right? And I filed the work permit before it expired. Okay? I have the legal right to stay in Canada until a decision is made. Let's say right now it's taking, 6 months to be decided. Okay, so I have the legal right to stay in Canada and work until April. But what if I wanted to go back for Christmas? If I left the country and went back to my home country to see my family for Christmas, guess what? When I come back, if I'm even allowed to come back, if I have a visa or something, I'm allowed, or I don't need a visa, I want to come back, I'm not allowed to work until the decision is made, irrespective of this stupid letter that you get, okay? Because the law is, if you leave Canada while you have implied status, you will lose that implied status. So first of all, keep in mind that if you want to stay in status, file your extension before the work permit expires. Again, the IRCC website, there's some place that says, oh, you should file it 30 days before. That's a recommendation. It is not the law. The law is, as long as you file it before it expires. You can even file it the day of. I don't usually recommend waiting until the last minute, but sometimes in certain circumstances, you want to buy as much time as possible. And so in those circumstances, you don't need to wait. You don't need to submit it 30 days before. You could submit it the last week or the day before, and you still will have that implied status until a decision is made. Unless what? Unless you leave the country. Okay? All right. Let's talk about the types of work permits. Now, this is a very small lettering. I don't know if all of you guys can see this, but it's kind of a little chart that I made where it has most of the categories for some of the most well-used work permits. So work permits, we have the open work permits, which is the post-grad work permits. There's spousal work permits, there's IEC, working holiday work permits, humanitarian work permits, such as, the ones for Ukraine, Iran, Israel, and the list goes on. The bridging work permits, which are the work permits that allow you to get an open work permit if you've passed a certain stage for your permanent residence. And so those are the open. You can work anywhere you want. Then on the other side, we have the employer-specific work permits. And the employer-specific work permits are divided into two categories. You have the LMIA, Labor Market Impact Assessment, and then you have the whole bunch of IMP, International Mobility Program work permits, okay? So, the International Mobility Work Permits program are all sorts of employer-specific work permits where you need an employer to support you, but the employer does not have to apply for LMIA. They don't have to show that they can't find a Canadian to do the job. what they have to do is they have to file an offer of employment on their employer portal. So we normally create an employer portal in a couple of days, and then we submit the offer of employment, and it just takes normally a few minutes for it to go through the system, and then there you have it. And then we can apply directly for the work permit. Okay. So talking about open work permits, bridging work permits, they're the ones where, for example, if you're an express entry, you have received your invitation to apply, and then you have submitted your application. Okay, then you can receive acknowledgement of receipt normally within a few minutes, and then you can apply for a bridging work permit, and it'll be an open work permit. Okay. There are also other kinds of work bridging work permits. For example, for the provincial nominee programs. There are for like provincial nominee programs, there's two kinds. One is an employer-specific one for certain programs, and other ones are for the open ones. For example, master's or PhD students, you can get the bridging work permit if you get the acknowledgement of receipt. So not just when you have the provincial nomination, you have to submit your application and then wait until they send you an email acknowledging receipt. Then you can apply for the bridging work permit. Okay. There are the open spousal work permits. So spouses can be married or common law. So if you've been living with someone for at least a year in a conjugal relationship, then you can apply for an open spousal work permit if they have a job. Currently, that's the situation for postgrad work permits. If you have a job and you have a postgrad work permit or other kinds of work permit, then your spouse can get it. But the government recently announced new rules that are coming up that might limit it only to spouses of people who have certain kinds of occupations, such as people in tier 0 or 1 occupations. We're not sure exactly how this is going to apply, but we can certainly send out news blasts. By the way, all of you guys who have registered for this webinar, we are going to put you on the list to send out to receive our news blasts of news that are that come out that may affect you, because as you know, immigration law changes in Canada like that. And what I tell you today may be true today, but it certainly will change maybe next week, definitely next month, and you know, for next year it'll be a whole new ball game sometimes. So that's how we're going to be able to update you on the news. Okay. All right. There's another one called IEC working holiday work permits, and this is something, it depends on the country that you're from. I put the link here, and it depends on your citizenship. And if you are, and depending on the agreement with the country, some countries, if you have to be under the age of 30, other countries you can be under the age of 35. And there is a pool where you can enter yourself into the pool, and then they can select you and invite you to apply for these open working holiday work permits. And they're usually good for maybe 1 year, sometimes they're 2 years, but you can't really extend it after that. Okay, but if you have a postgrad work permit and you've never applied for a working holiday work permit and you're one of the nationalities that can get this, then that's something that you can try. All right, let's talk about some employer-specific work permits now. So LMI-As, okay, everybody has heard about these LMI-As, and there's certainly a lot of restrictions that have started and that will come up as well. So the government announced before that the low-wage workers are basically going to be, so the government has set up surveys where they have determined the median wage of workers in each province. Normally, they're around the 28, 29 sort of range, okay? And so if your salary falls below that, then it would be the low wage. If it is going to be above that, it would be high wage, okay? And so the government, starting last month, September 26th, basically restricted the low wage LMIAs. Most people, unless you fit under specific sectors, or unless the place that you are in does not have a very unemployment rate over 6%, or and your employer has to, there's a cap on the percentage for your employer, etc., you may not be able to apply for LMIA. The government recently just announced as well that they're going to increase salary requirements for high wage workers as well, starting in November as well. So that means that even the high wage workers, your salaries you can still apply, but your salaries would need to be that much higher than the median wage. Okay. Now, for the low wage workers, though, there is an exception to the 6% unemployment rule, where you can't apply for them if it's 6%, which is, and you don't belong to one of the occupations in demand, is that if you were to apply for a LMIA that only supports permanent residence, not for another work permit, only supports permanent residence, that you're still able to submit that. There's also a very nice program for LMIAs called the Global Talent Stream. And for the most part, they're used for people in the STEM industries. There's specific occupations that you can use them for, and the government, it does not require the employer to recruit Canadians. It's processed in around 1 to 2 weeks, and the employer, instead of showing they can't find Canadians, they show that they are going to provide labor market benefits such as hiring workers, training Canadians, etc. in Canada. Okay. All right. So beyond the LMIAs, we have other programs. One of my favorite programs are the Free Trade Agreement Professional programs. These are programs where if you are a professional of certain countries, you're a national of certain countries, and you are offered a professional occupation in Canada. Some countries like Colombia and Peru, it could be that it's almost all of the tier 0s or 1 occupations. In some countries, where they're like Americans, it has to be a specified occupation on the list. But we have lots of agreements with South American countries like Mexico. Well, Mexico is not South America, but Latin American countries like Mexico, Peru, Colombia, who has Chile, Panama. We have agreements with Europe. We have EU and UK. We have agreements with Australia through the CPTPP, Japan, New Zealand, and the list goes on. And so if you are a national of one of the free trade agreements, then countries, then there are certain ways we can apply for the work permits. The one change that the government did come up with last 2 weeks ago is that now the free trade professionals have to meet median wage, have to meet the prevailing wage as well for the work permits. The other one that I really like are the Francophone work permits. Now, most of you might say, well, I can't study another language. It's too difficult. How am I supposed to be able to do that? Here's the thing, okay? The Francophone work permits will only require you to speak and listen to the level, CLB level of 5. You don't need to write or read. You just need to speak and listen. So sometimes if you have some time of still left on your work permit and you say, you know what, I don't mind, studying really hard and maybe have a tutor and being able to do just speaking and listening, just 5 to the CLB 5 level, then we can apply for a Francophone work permit. Your employer does not have to do an LMIA. The employer just has to file an offer of employment for you. And it could be any job, any job. It doesn't have to use French, or it doesn't matter if it uses French or not. Any job of any level outside of Quebec. As long as the job's outside of Quebec, we can get you a work permit. Okay, so that's something outside of the box to think about. If you work for a religious organization or you are working in a charitable job, so the work that you have to do, it's not just you work for religion, but the work that you do is religious, or the work that you do is of a charitable nature, then we could apply for a work permit under this category as well. Again, it is not an LMIA. And finally, we have, well, not finally, I have another one after this, but we do have significant benefit work permits. So oftentimes we use this for artists, where if you are self-employed, but you're going to create significant benefit to the cultural and enhance the culture of Canada, then oftentimes we can use the significant benefit work permit for you. The IEC Young Professionals Work Permit is something that it's just like the working holiday work permit. Most countries that participate with working holiday will also have a young professionals. But what's nice about young professionals is the competition is not as high. And all of these employer-specific work permits, they will help you to get your arranged employment points for express entry, okay? So with the LMIAs, as soon as you get an LMIA work permit, you get the 50 points. With these other IMP work permits, you can get 50 points after you've worked for the organization for a year. And I wanted to talk about reciprocal agreements. So sometimes if the company that you work with sends Canadians to work outside of the country, then we could apply for a work permit, because the number of people that they send outside of the country, we can then say that we get to apply for work permits for people to get the work permits under the reciprocal agreement to get the work permit there. Okay, so it's called they have to have a global mobility plan as a reciprocal agreement. And then finally, for you entrepreneurs out there who want to own a business, if you own more than half or over 50% of the business, and you create significant benefits to Canada, like increase in labor or technology or etc., economic, social, etc., then we can apply for a work permit for you as well. Okay, if you're in the entrepreneur sort of space, let me know. there's a lot of things that we need to talk about. And if you, want to do any of this, let me know. And certainly there's a lot we can talk about. Okay. So I want to have, I'm sure a lot of you guys have questions. And so I want to get to those. I just wanted to let you know, here is our email and phone number. And if you like to schedule a consultation to go over the plan for yourself, please do email us. Email is probably the easier one to do than phone, but either one will work. And we can schedule a consultation for you. We will offer you guys who have attended the Devant seminar a student discount. So normally our fee is $150. We will let you come, and we'll do $100 only for you guys. It's by Zoom. You don't have to come to our office, and we will go over your plan with you. Okay. All right, Sisha.
Wow.
We
Well,
have yeah.
yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I know that you've had a long day as well, and we've got a big queue of questions, almost 40 questions. I see lots of hearts and thank yous coming through by everyone. Thank you guys so much, for your reactions. Yeah, please keep those reactions coming. It's been very helpful and very encouraging, Elizabeth, to hear all of your suggestions. I'm going to get right to the questions so we can try to get through as many as we can. It's 7:33, so we've got about half an hour for your questions, everyone. So I'm going to try to get to the more general ones first and just whip through them. If there are any specific ones that are more personal, I do encourage you, if I don't get to those, please reach out to Elizabeth. Okay, so here we go, Elizabeth. If I want to apply under the AIP program, do I have to move to the Atlantic, as I am currently working remotely for an Atlantic employer?
Right. So yes, for AIP, normally you would want to yes, they do want to see that you're there. AI, if you're going to be living in the Atlantic provinces, oftentimes we find that the provincial nominee programs are even better than the AIP. But yes, they do want people who are living there to apply.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your questions, everyone. Next question. Does freelance hours count as eligible hours for CEC if the company does my tax? And can you please explain what CEC is for those who are not sure?
Sure, I think this person is asking about the Canadian Experience class for express entry. So the Canadian Experience class expressly uh, it says that you cannot use self-employment work as work experience in Canada. And so you have to say, so it basically, you have to get that T4 from your employer. And it has to be something where, you're getting your deductions coming out, and you are under the control from them. Okay. Otherwise, you'll have a hard time proving that you were not self-employed during that time.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Elizabeth, do you also assist like with BC PNP applications as well?
Yes, absolutely. We do PMPs and PRs and work permits. Well, work permits are federal, and permanent residence throughout Canada. The only place we don't do them is Quebec for permanent residents.
Okay, thank you. For work permits, can we still work if our temporary work permit expires, but we still haven't received our final decision?
Again, so this is where I say there is what? No such thing as the temporary work permit. That letter is nothing. That letter does not give you or take away status. You have implied status by right. Even if you didn't have that letter, you still have the right to work. And if you need to work beyond that stupid random date on the letter, guess what? You can if a decision has not been made.
Okay, thank you. So, I really encourage you guys to reach out to Elizabeth if you have specific questions as well. I see a lot of specific questions coming in. I'm just going to continue down the list. Okay, Elizabeth, thank you so much. Um, why are the postgraduate work permits taking too much time to resolve?
Why are the post-grad work permits taking too much time to resolve? Why do they take so long to be issued? Well,
Mm-hmm.
all work permits right now are taking a very long time to be issued. They're normally taking around something like 146 days inside Canada. Um, that might not be a bad thing though. If you think about it, sometimes you want to be able to work in Canada for as long as possible because it might take a while for this whole, bubble of so many temporary work permits people holders who are trying to get the spots for permanent residence to sort of sort itself out. And so anytime that you are working on implied status, that work experience counts for permanent residence. And so let's say it takes 8 months for your postgrad work permit to be issued. Well, guess what? If you submitted your application on time before 90 days, look at some of my other webinars, okay? If you submit your work permit within the 90 days after your study program ends, and it takes, you know, let's say 8 months to be issued. Well, that's a good thing. You just bought yourself 8 more months of time that you can work in Canada. Yes, you can't leave, and it's pain in the neck that you can't leave, but you can start working if you apply properly. As soon as you apply, even if you don't have your postgrad work permit.
Okay, thank you so much. Please, another question came in. Please, I wanted to ask, after 1 year of my postgrad work permit, how can I extend my postgrad work permit since it's only a year? So if someone has had a 1 year postgrad work permit, can they extend it?
Well, that's the thing. You can't. The only time you can sort of apply for an extension is if you're entitled to 3 years and you got a shorter work permit because, let's say, your passport expired early. In that case, you can file an extension to be the full length of time of your 3 year postgrad work permit. But let's say you were only entitled to a 1 year work permit because your program was 1 year. Well, the key thing is that I wish you would have come to me before you actually applied for your 1 year work permit. Because unfortunately, after you get that 1 year work permit, you can't extend your postgrad work permit again. You will have to qualify under another category. And, I went through some of those categories that you might be able to qualify for.
Okay. I'm going to try to get to the work permit extension questions first. We've got another one that's interesting. Regarding the random date you mentioned that's included in the work permit extension after postgraduate work permit application, if the employer insists that we cannot work after the supposed date on that letter, under such time the postgraduate application is approved, is it even legal on their end to make us stop working? Is there any turnaround if this happens, I guess, or anything that the candidate or the worker can do?
Okay. I'm gonna put this link in the chat. Okay.
Okay.
Let me see here. I'm gonna put this, hold on. Okay, so this is a link where you can go to the IRCC website that says that if we don't finalize your application by the date of the letter, in bold, you can still keep working until we make a decision. Send that to your employer, okay?
Great.
Oftentimes, my clients might ask me to send an email to the employer as well, explaining this, but it's the law, and the government, believe it or not, can't go against the law. So this random date, if you need to work beyond and you don't have a decision, what you can do is you can submit a screenshot of your portal. Send it to your employer because a screenshot will clearly show whether or not a decision has been made. Normally, I send a screenshot and I have that submission letter, not the work permit extension letter, the letter that says, oh, you have submitted your application on such and such date, and I show it to the employer, and then you can show them this website. I usually quote the regulations as well to them, and by that time, the employer tends to be to understand the situation.
Mhm. And I do want to mention to everyone, you can refer employers to speak with Elizabeth and her team as well. She also can consult employers and provide the legal background and advice to them directly at their cost. Okay.
Oh, and
There is a
also on
question.
my on our social media, we kind of went on a hiatus over the summer on our social media, but we're gonna start up again. But on my social media, I do have a a sort of video, a little video where I do talk about this sort of random date that's one of my pet peeves. So yeah, you can check that out as well.
Okay.
Mhm.
It looks like it's causing a lot more confusion. I see some questions here around following up. So if someone has applied for their PR through RNIP, passed all their medical and biomedical phases, but they still have not heard, is there a way for them to follow up on their application status?
Yeah, so the RNIP is a permanent residence application. Listen, there are all sorts of delays everywhere. It's not just on one kind of application. So in general, I mean, you could send web forms. How much good they do, I don't necessarily know. Um, but um, you can also ask your member of parliament if they can follow up as well. Sometimes because they do have a direct line to IRCC, and sometimes that helps. If it goes way beyond, like let's say it's way over a year when regular processing comes, we might take a look at this and see whether or not we can go to federal court and have the court order the government to act. That's called a mandamus. Sometimes, if you're from certain countries, there are security checks where it's not even IRCC officers that look at it. It's CSIS, which is like our version of the CIA, that then has to go and liaise with that country's secret service, and they basically go and see whether or not there are security issues. And in some countries, Iran, China, it can be difficult because the relationship is not very good. And so it may be typical, depending on the country where you're from, where all your medicals are done, all your the police certificates, etc., are submitted, but you're just stuck. And um, a lot of times it's security. But there are a reasonable lengths of time for security. And if it just takes, year and a half, 2 years, and you still don't have a decision, then we might be able to file a mandamus. In the meantime, you should be able to get your work permits, bridging work permits. RNIP has a work permit as well that you can get.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, I mean, as you've explained, once they've applied for their postgrad work permit, they have implied status. What about if they have an extension letter and that extension letter expires as well? Can they still continue working under that implied status?
Yeah, implied status. The extension letter does not give you status. It explains that you have status, but it does not confer status to you.
So in that case, someone who has an extension letter, should they stop working or can they continue working?
You continue working until a decision is made.
Great. Okay, thank you. So that you should be okay, the person that just asked that question. Um, I think you already talked about this, but someone asked about high wage LMIAs under not-for-profit organizations. I think you've already explained that.
So for not-for-profit organizations, it depends on the work that you do. So in the guidelines, they talk about the difference between, someone who's working as an accountant for a nonprofit. That job in and of itself is not charitable. Whereas, let's say you're a caseworker and you're directly helping people with their your people who are in poverty, or who have social issues, etc., that then could be charitable. And then we can apply for a charitable work permit that's LMIA exempt. You don't have to go through a LMIA for that.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I see some questions around spousals. So some people are asking, if they have a postgrad work permit and applied for PR, can their spouse get a work permit if they came as a visitor or like on a temporary work permit?
So your spouse can get a work permit right now if you have a job. Okay, if you have a job right now, it doesn't really matter high skilled or low skilled. If you have a job right now and you have a work permit, then your spouse can get an open work permit. That is about to change. Don't know exactly when, but it's about to change. The government has said that they want to limit that.
Mm-hmm.
So far, they haven't changed. They haven't changed yet. Go and file this before it changes.
Mm-hmm. So thank you very much. So that's a window there of opportunity. So you want to make sure that you're within that window. I am seeing some questions about this November 1st date. So someone's asking, I think it'll apply to many people. If we've applied for the SOWP extension prior to November 1st and not received a decision after November 1st, does the old rule or policy still apply to us, or the new ones as of November 1st will affect me?
Okay, so there is a so basically there are rules surrounding the post-grad work permits that are applicable to people um, who have applied for their study permits after. If you have applied for your post-grad work have applied for your study permit before your applied for your study permit beforehand, then you can get the post-grad work permit um, uh, uh, before the date. Then you can get your post-grad work permit. It just has to be you just have to pass the the language tests. So we're gonna do a whole session on these new changes when I think next time, right? Next month.
Yes, yes. So our next session is at the end of the month. We are going to do a focus session just on the November 1st changes. So if you have questions related to that, please make sure you register. Elizabeth will talk more in detail on that. Okay. So next question. Thank you for your questions. We've got 80 questions. We're not going to be able to get through all of these questions, but I'm going to encourage you to please reach out to Elizabeth directly when you've got some personal circumstantial questions that relate to you. So next question. Please clarify when bridging permits apply versus work permit extension.
So a bridging work permit, you are allowed to get a bridging work permit when you still have a work permit or you're within restoration of your work permit and you have received approval to a certain level of your application. So for example, if you're in going through the express entry system and you have an ITA, then you can apply for your postgrad work permit. Then you can apply for your bridging work permit if you have your ITA. If you don't have your ITA and you haven't submitted your application, then you don't get access to the bridging work permit. Sometimes what I do is I kind of file an extension of a person's work permit before it expires. And if they get an invitation to apply after I file it, because it takes a long time, and then the new work permit is then they get an ITA, we submit the application and we get the AOR, then I will follow it up and say update the application and say, hey, the new hey, by the way, we have now they qualify for a bridging work permit, and then we can actually apply for then they'll actually issue the work permit. But so I file the extensions. I try to file the extensions before it expires, no matter what, just to buy some time. So sometimes it doesn't, it's okay if your work permit is extended for a long period of time, because the time you can buy yourself some time to try to get your permanent residence. Let's say you try to get your provincial nomination and it takes a while. So then during that time, if you get your provincial nomination, you can say to the officer, hey, we submit an update, and hey, now this person can get a work permit based on the provincial nomination. So you can always get these kind of bridging work permits as long as you still have status, or you're within restoration period as well.
Okay, thank you. And when do you recommend that they follow up? I see some questions about timing to follow up if they haven't heard back. How long should they wait?
Following up, whether or not it does any good is difficult to say. Whether or not, you're by submitting a web form, it's actually going to work at all. You can take a look at the regular work permit processing times online, but beyond that, you can also, a lot of times work permits take much longer than what is stated online. And sometimes you can ask a member of parliament to help. You can submit your web forms. And like I said, if it takes way, way, way longer, then we can go to federal court.
Okay, thank you. A question around extending the work permit. Do they need to renew their SIN and OHIP as well?
So when you're extending your work permit, when you're on implied status, social insurance number will not be extended until you get your new work permit. But the social insurance number that you have, it may expire, but it won't change when you get your new work permit. So you're still able to use the same social insurance number for your payroll. It's just that when you get your new work permit, then you go to Service Canada and they'll update the expiry date. For the OHIP, you can use that work permit extension letter. That's the one thing it's good for, is you can use it to try to get your OHIP during that period of maintained status.
Okay. Do you have any insight about the temporary policy extending of postgrad work permit expiring until December 2024? I have a current employer, but due to the election, I cannot get the certificate from PNP that I registered okay, sorry, I'm not sure if I understand this question. I cannot get the certificate from PNP that I registered in the BC PNP pool. I'm not really understanding that question. I would encourage you to talk to Elizabeth or reach out to Elizabeth directly for that one. There's a question around Francophone, and Elizabeth did answer that as well. So I would encourage you to follow up with her if you've got follow-up questions around Francophones, but there are benefits if you speak French. Just going through the questions. What are the main criteria for people who are entrepreneurs? I see a number of questions for people who are entrepreneurs. Again, I think that's a different topic. Elizabeth does a separate session around pathways for individuals. But Elizabeth, is there anything that you want to say around entrepreneurs in the meantime?
So entrepreneurs, we really have to do some calculations. If permanent residence is what you want, because you need to have permanent residence in order to, stay in Canada, then entrepreneurs, because your work experience is not counted as self-employment, the routes towards permanent residence may be different than other people. On the one hand, with an entrepreneur work permit, you can get arranged employment points of maybe 200 points because you're at the executive level. So you may not need the Canadian work experience points to qualify for Canadian experience class. On the other hand, if your business fails, or if you're not able to get an entrepreneur work permit, then you would lose your work experience points. There are also other kinds of programs, such as the Startup Visa program, that would be particularly good for the entrepreneur work permit, for the entrepreneurs, depending on the circumstances. I think we did do an entrepreneur. I can't
You
remember.
did.
We did a
You
whole
did.
thing on entrepreneurs as well. So yeah, please go back and take a look. Then, sometimes things have changed now. For example, for intercompany transfers, that might not work anymore. So maybe we'll do another one coming up.
Okay, that might be beneficial. Okay, thank you. Also, what if they get their return information and the address is wrong on the documents? How do they get something corrected on the physical copy?
So there is a whole process that you can do where you can go. It's on the website. You'll need to amend your temporary resident document.
Okay, thank you. Um, do you need a work permit if you are self-employed? That's a really good question.
Yes, you will need a work permit if you're self-employed. If you're going to be managing any businesses in Canada, if you're going to be working in any businesses in Canada, yes, you do need a work permit to do so.
Okay, great. And the individual that asked that question, I see you have other questions as well. I do recommend that you follow up with Elizabeth directly for those more specific questions. Someone has a question around the home support worker program. Do I need a full-time job or do my hours count since I am a part-time PSW?
So if you are so first of all, the home support worker program has not been announced yet as to it's not in place yet. They made some announcements as to what the minister wants for the new program, but they haven't implemented it yet. So we don't know exactly what the rules are. But it is a good program for a lot of people who are who would be okay with taking care of people in their homes. Um, because you can get a LMIA work permit for to be a caregiver in someone's home if you already have a work permit in Canada. So let's say if some of you let's say I want to be take care of someone in their home. If I have a post-grad work permit, open work permit, I can start taking care of them in their home. And then later, if my work permit is going to expire, I can always they can file a LMIA and extend my work permit that way. I can only do that work, but with the new caregiver program coming up, there is a good chance that after I have a certain amount of work experience, that I would be able to qualify for permanent residence under the new caregiver programs.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm just going through the questions, trying to answer as many of your questions as possible. Can I get a work permit if I applied to OINP under my post-grad work permit?
Can I get a work permit if I applied for an OINP? Yes, depending on your program. So some programs are the employer-based programs. So you will have to apply with the employer support. So they'll have to file an offer of employment, like I said, under it's one of the IMP programs. And then with the provincial nomination certificate, you can apply for permanent residence. Other kinds, like the master stream, PhD stream, which is not employer-based, you will have to submit your permanent residence, get the AOR letter, and then you would be qualified to get an open work permit.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I see that it's at 8 o'clock right now. I'm just going to invite everyone. Please help us to understand if this session has been useful for you. Would love to get your feedback. I'm going to ask this other question because I think this could apply to a lot of people. I was told that the post-grad work permit are given only a once in a lifetime, but as I understand, there's a possibility to get another work permit after the current post-grad work permit expires. I also saw some people were asking if they did a 1-year program and they wanted to do another 1-year program to make it 2 years, then that would give them a better chance to get a post-grad work permit. So, what are sort of your thoughts on when should someone apply for that post-grad work permit? And is it a once in a lifetime opportunity?
So the post-grad, you have to understand that you can get a work permit under all sorts of different categories. You can only get a post-grad work permit once in your lifetime. You can get another work permit. I talked about the other categories, and there's multiple different kind of categories. So it's not like you can only get one work permit in your life, but you can right now only get one post-grad work permit in your life.
Okay, thank you so much. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank Elizabeth. I do want to share with you some other perks that we have for you. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time and expertise. Please show Elizabeth your love in the emojis and the reactions. I have a huge queue of questions. I am going to go through the questions and respond if some of these questions were answered already. And if I can answer just the directional, I see there's some basic questions. I'm also going to respond and stay a couple minutes after. Elizabeth, again, thank you so much on behalf of all the students for the work that you do, for your advocacy, and for your volunteering here with us today to answer these questions for students. I see lots of clapping coming through. Can I ask you maybe to share the next slides for me? Thank you so much.
Of course.
I'd just like to let you guys know about what's coming up and how else Devant can support you in your with the following events that we have. So coming up, we've got Keep It Professional, how to email employers next week. We have live employer insights where you can talk to recruiters, get your questions answered, and we are looking forward to helping you connect with some live feedback on interviews and getting jobs. We've got LinkedIn profile, a live group career coaching, and then November 27th, this is the one that is going to be offered. And we're actually very excited to say that this is sponsored by CIBC. We're going to adjust this topic so that it's more relevant since there's the new rules that have happened on November 1st. So we're going to focus on the new rules and how it impacts you. And hopefully we can get more of your questions answered. I think we have another slide there, Elizabeth, after this one. Great. And just a reminder that for those of you who are looking for jobs or need support, again, please go to your career center. If you are currently enrolled student, you have free career services supports, and you have a lot of other supports through your university and colleges. If you need additional help, Devant also offers these services, which are one-on-one career coaching, LinkedIn audits, resume, and cover letter writing as well. So please go on to our website for more information. Next slide. There we go. And then for those of you who are curious, as you know, looking at your scores or not understanding where you're at, we also have a free service as one of our partners through Improved. You can go on, put your information here, and get an idea of where you stand. After you've done this score, I do recommend that you do speak to a professional such as Elizabeth, or you can contact Improved as well. This is an extra service for you as well. Next slide. I think that might be our last slide. Yeah, it's our last slide. Okay, great. So again, I want to thank you all so much. You will receive a feedback form. I really would love to encourage you to fill that out so that this way we can curate the topics that matter to you most. And for those of you who have a little bit more time, as I said, I am going to stop the recording right now, but I will stay on a little bit more in case you've got any general housekeeping questions that I can answer for you from Devant. So at this point, Elizabeth, I just want to wish you a good evening. Thanks again so much for your time, and we'll see you again November 27th.
Thank
Bye.
you. Great to see you all. Take care.